Last time on NichePlays, and by that I mean way back in July, Niche reviewed the legacy of Goku for the Game Boy Advance. Now, several months later, he's ready to take a step back and review Goku's childhood adventures in Dragon Ball Advanced Adventure. Will he give it a good review? Will he find a playful way to start this video, having already blown his best Dragon Ball joke on the last one? Find out today on NichePlays.
NichePlays, episode 31, a really underrated Dragon Ball game that I somehow didn't play back in my childhood. Thanks for the cameo, Pam.
Your reign of terror is over, evil King Piccolo. Well, if it isn't the Monkey King himself, here to watch me send more of your friends to another dimension. I'd watch your mouth if I were you, you filthy green... Hey, do you mind telling me what the deal is with your costume? Wait, what? Like, what about it? Okay, yeah, sorry, so rude of me to bring it up, but like, we're trying to recreate an epic battle between good and evil, and you're wearing a Grateful Dead shirt. Oh, okay, you're gonna love it. I'm the old King Piccolo, right? So I'm into old stuff, like the Grateful Dead. Oh, no, sorry, I totally get what you're going for. It's just like, not that accurate to the source material, though. Okay, well, what about you, man? You've got a literal gun. Yeah, and I legally christened it the Nimbus. Okay, you know what? Cards on the table, dude. I did the best I could given the short amount of time we had before we did this. Okay, yeah, that's valid. All right, great. So are we gonna fight or not? I thought you'd never ask. Wait, what? Gumby arms! Sorry, there was a fly in here.
Released in 2004, Dragon Ball Advanced Adventure is a 2D action game / beat 'em up for the Game Boy Advance. Developed by Dimps, the game is an adaptation of the first chunk of the popular anime and manga property of the same name, and retells the majority of the original run of Dragon Ball. In it, you take control of a young Goku as he travels around the world in search of the 7 mystical wish-granting Dragon Balls, fights evil, and takes inspiration from the famous legend of the Monkey King in the process. Despite being developed by Osaka, Japan-based Dimps, who were synonymous with developing the well-remembered Dragon Ball Z Budokai games for home consoles back in the early 2000s, the game marks their first foray into bringing the property to portable consoles, though it's far from being the first Dragon Ball game in general to ever do so. However, Advanced Adventure is actually a pretty unique game when it comes to Dragon Ball Z titles. For starters, it emphasizes beat-em-up gameplay with platforming action, which is something that very few, if any, other Dragon Ball games have actually done before. As weird as it may sound, there have actually been more card-based Dragon Ball games over the years than there have beat-em-up themed ones. Which, you know, is pretty strange given the fact that Dragon Ball is about martial artists unleashing flashy special moves. At the time of its release, Dragon Ball Advanced Adventure received mixed to positive reviews, with critics agreeing that it was a fun and enjoyable experience, a breath of fresh air after several yearly releases of games about the Series Z iteration, and that it was a worthy late addition to the Game Boy Advance's library. But does it hold up? Dragon Ball is one of my favorite media franchises of all time, and as such, I'm going into this game with some fairly high expectations. My girlfriend and I regularly quote both the anime and manga. I regularly tell people to watch the delightfully awful live-action unlicensed movies from back in the day, and I grew up playing all of the Dragon Ball Z fighting games that came out on home consoles of the time with my friends. However, despite my lofty expectations for this game, it already has one thing going for it that puts it a cut above the rest. And that's the fact that it covers Goku's childhood, which is my favorite part of Dragon Ball's story, as well as happens to be criminally underrepresented in video games. Anyway, the point still stands. I'm really excited to give this game a shot for this review today because, for whatever reason, I somehow missed out on it when I was a kid. But here we are. I only found out about this game like 2 years ago when I bought a Pocket Go and it came preloaded on the console. Before we continue though, a quick question of the day. What was your favorite game console when you were growing up? And do you still find yourself playing it often? Be sure to leave your answer to the question of the day over in the comments. I'd love to hear your answer. And if you're new here and are enjoying what you see so far, feel free to subscribe to the channel and stuff so that you can watch all the other videos I'll be putting out in the future. On top of that, if you're into podcasts, feel free to check out my retro movie and TV podcast, Media Obscura. The information for that is in the description as well as at the end of this video. And with that out of the way, on with the video. The majority of the game plays out as a hybrid between 2D beat-em-up levels with elements of a platformer thrown in, along with these one-on-one fighting sections that are also added for good measure. The combination of these styles creates a relatively well-constructed game that feels authentic to Dragon Ball, stands out as being a bit more thoughtful in its design when compared to a market of extremely samey but still pretty fun fighters based off the series, and also makes for a fairly interesting game in and of itself. Though I personally wouldn't have also minded playing through something like Dragon Ball Checkers and Hecklers instead. Anyway, the beat-em-up levels play similar to flatter games in the genre, and in them, Goku is tasked with finding his way through a stage, walloping on any of the poor souls that get in his way, and reaching either a goal or boss battle in order to get that Dragon Ball! And move on to the next level. Even though these levels rely on a tried and true formula to get things done, there's actually quite a bit more to them than meets the eye. For starters, Goku has a wide variety of attacks at his disposal, ranging from the typical wham and bam variety of punches and kicks, to also being able to access his trusty power pole, which can be worked into combos and used for flashy special techniques. And as if that weren't enough, you can also unleash the series' iconic Kamehameha Wave and other key-based and regular attacks that you unlock on your journey. This all culminates in Advanced Adventure having extremely satisfying combat. Despite the fact that the GBA doesn't have rumble or anything, the versatility available to the player in their attacks and the great sprite animation used to convey those moves gives everything a sort of heft that's an utter delight to watch and can borderline be felt by the player.
Hefty, hefty, hefty. That's what I'm talking about.
There's just a certain to hitting enemies here that's genuinely pretty addictive and had me eager to come back to the game to record more footage of it. While I wouldn't say that the game gives me an unquenchable thirst for combat or anything, these beat-em-up stages are a lot of fun and do a great job of capturing the excitement found in an episode of Dragon Ball. It is worth mentioning though that these stages can sometimes be a bit too easy for their own good though. In fact, even though these stages are actually pretty well constructed, Dragon Ball Advanced Adventure has some fairly serious difficulty issues due to how straight up overpowered Goku is as a character. And even though that does make sense, I mean it's literally Goku's thing in the manga and anime to absolutely decimate most of the people in his path, it leads to the game's difficulty often feeling as though it's on a plateau of sorts. The only real challenge that comes from these levels, outside of a few boss battles that can take a second or two to get your bearings in, is the fact that these levels also like to throw bottomless pits your way.
I did mention that this game was by Dimps, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a bit of a meme to make fun of how much Dimps loves their bottomless pits based off the Sonic Advance series and all, but Advanced Adventure also happens to fall victim to them. And honestly, they were probably the worst part of the game for me. And it's not even like they were that bad of an issue here or anything either. But they're also a bit strange to find in a game like this, especially since so much of Advanced Adventure's design feels rooted in beat-em-ups. Much like in any other beat-em-up, getting hit by enemies results in a bit of knockback, and when combined with level designs that are more becoming of a game with enemies that can't literally throw you off a ledge, things can quickly get frustrating because of it. Again, it's not game-breaking or anything, but it is a strange bit of game design on the part of Dimps that certainly stands out in not quite that good of a way. Back to the positive though, mowing down cannon fodder is a lot of fun. The bosses are also pretty fun to take down, even if they're a bit too easy to cheese, and the levels are mostly well designed and pretty easy to navigate. While linear at its core, Advanced Adventure does like to occasionally throw some alternate paths your way in order to encourage exploration, and can either lead to you finding extra health or an item of some kind, or bring you to a red door that opens up after you've beaten the game. There's also a fairly good amount of variety to these levels too, with them taking you across the world of Dragon Ball and encompassing standard platform-style stages, flight-based ones that have you fighting enemies from atop the flying Nimbus, and even the occasional minigame stages that has Goku trying to complete some kind of training exercise, such as trying to catch Korin or destroy these rocks that Master Roshi throws your way.
I especially like that minigame because it reminds me of the training montage from Turkish Star Wars. You know, Turkish Star Wars, right? Well, if you don't, I highly recommend checking it out if you're into So Bad They're Good movies. It's seriously worth a watch, it's a total hoot.
Anyway, alongside these beat-em-up stages are some one-on-one fighting levels that are much more along the lines of what I'd expect from Dimps. In them, you're thrown into one of the many iconic fights from the original series for some good old fisticuffs and are expected to wombo, schlombo, and combo your way to victory. And you know what? These sections are actually pretty good. They use a modified version of your moveset from the beat-em-up stages, and it feels relatively similar to it, but is optimized for these sorts of encounters. You can block, parry, and launch opponents up into the sky, and you can even use Goku's tail as a helicopter propeller just like in the anime. Given the fact that this isn't Dimp's first rodeo when it comes to Dragon Ball themed fighters, I guess this isn't that surprising though. Their work on the Budokai games is beloved after all, and while those earlier Budokais felt a bit generic and rough around the edges when compared to some of their later attempts, the team clearly knew what aspects of the franchise to emphasize when making a fighting game. And for the most part, I think they did a great job of translating that to these levels, while also remaining cognizant of the Game Boy Advance's hardware limitations and the fact that this wasn't the central gameplay style for the title to begin with. The fighting sections have a genuine snappiness to them that makes it extremely satisfying to play through, and while the beat-em-up sections accomplish the same result by throwing heaps of disposable opponents your way, these levels are cool because they force you to slow down and really feel the weight of your punches. I especially appreciate your moveset here because of how much mileage Dimps managed to squeeze out of the Game Boy Advance's limited button layout. Because yeah, I mean, look at this thing. It has 4 buttons! But much to Dimps' credit though, the fighting mechanics all feel relatively intuitive and rely much more on a sense of inertia and kineticism than perfectly executed button combos, which I'm usually bad at. It's all really easy to pick up, and even better, matches the controls and general logic found in the beat-em-up stages. While these fights could have just been normal boss battles at the end of a stage or something, developing an auxiliary gameplay style for them was a really nice touch. And this is especially true due to the fact that, as far as 2D fighters on the Game Boy Advance go, Dragon Ball Advanced Adventure is actually the deepest game in the bunch.
Not that that's really that much of an accomplishment though, because the other fighting games on the Game Boy Advance were Dragon Ball Z Supersonic Warriors, which was genuinely fantastic in its own right, and Dragon Ball Taiketsu, which I will have to get to one day, because wow.
Honestly, that deepest game in the bunch comment probably applies to this game in general too. While it isn't an action RPG that tries to meticulously retell a specific portion of the Dragon Ball story like the Legacy of Goku games did, it does a fairly good job of recapping most of the original Dragon Ball's lore through short cutscenes between each level. Though it does also leave the last chunk of the story out for, reasons, I suppose. Even though the game excludes the Piccolo Jr. portion of the story, it still feels fairly comprehensive in its storytelling. I mean, sure, things are simplified and streamlined for dramatic purposes, but it's still a pretty dang solid recap of the story. Plus, the game even manages to throw in a decent amount of bonus content for people looking for some extra mileage with the game or some good old-fashioned fan service. Beating the game's main campaign may only take 2 or so hours, but it allows you to play through the entire game again as Goku's best friend Krillin. And to make things even better, Krillin isn't just a simple sprite swap for Goku. He's a completely new character with his own moves and combos to use. And while Dimps honestly could have stopped there if they had wanted to, they didn't. You can continue to unlock new characters to play through specific levels by finding and collecting the 7 mystical Dragon Balls.
Not that that's something I actually got to do for this video, but it's something I do intend to do in my free time sometime in the near future because, yeah, this game is like actually pretty addictive.
You can also play a one-on-one fighting game mode, enjoy the training minigames from the campaign at your own leisure, and participate in some one-on-one multiplayer if that tickles your fancy. What I'm getting at is that there's a lot of content here, and that due to the game mixing beat 'em up and fighting gameplay, it manages to feel fresh and engaging for a pretty long time.
Oh yeah, and this game is also fairly good looking too.
Dragon Ball Advanced Adventure has a bright and vibrant color palette that's easy to decipher, aesthetically pleasing, and does a pretty good job of recreating Dragon Ball's classic look and feel. Between each of the levels, we're given these short cutscenes that fill us in on what's happening in the story, and I can't for the life of me overstate how much I appreciate the artwork for these sections. As opposed to something like Dragon Ball Z: The Legacy of Goku, the game actually has art made specifically for these cutscenes. And while it may sound like a small detail, it goes a really long way in making the game feel like a quality product that was made out of a love for the franchise. While the aforementioned artwork from The Legacy of Goku was ripped straight from the anime, it also had to be fairly compressed to fit on the GBA's 240 by 160 screen. But by going in and creating new art, Akira Toriyama's iconic art style for the series was able to be tweaked slightly to better fit the hardware. And what this means is that dithering and stuff was used to simulate or imply some of the details that were obscured by the hardware, and that some of the characters' designs and environments were also simplified for convenience sake. Speaking of tweaks to the character designs though, there is one gripe that I have with this game's visuals, and it's the fact that several of the characters, namely Goku and Krillin, have actually been redesigned to appear leaner and less chubby than they did back in the manga and anime. I know it isn't the biggest deal, but it's kind of a bummer to see some of my favorite fictional characters done dirty like this. Their new designs aren't bad per se, but they do lack a lot of the charm that their original incarnations had.
Rationally, it's actually not that big a deal, though personally I can't believe they've desecrated my childhood like this, and I simply won't stand for it. Like, seriously, it's as bad as what they've done to Pikachu as far as I'm concerned.
Anyway, the game's also got some great animation going for it, has a decent amount of variety when it comes to its enemies, and remains clean and easy to navigate from a visual perspective. If I had to be picky though, I guess I would have loved to see the game's backgrounds work in more layering and stuff, as in its current state, it does often feel a little flat. Overall though, I wouldn't say that Advanced Adventure pushes the Game Boy Advance all that hard in terms of its graphics, but that it also didn't have to at the same time. The game's music is also, for the most part, relatively fine. While I personally thought that it was a bit too generic for my own tastes, it's still fairly enjoyable on its own merits.
One thing that I can't overlook though is the fact that the theme sounds, well, really familiar. Like, seriously, listen to this for a sec. Did you hear it? Because, I don't know, to me, it sounds just a tiny bit like the opening to the theme of, well, Dragon Ball.
And what's strange about this is the fact that the Japanese version of the game just straight up uses that theme instead of what we got overseas. Even though this probably came down to a simple rights dispute somewhere down the line, it's a huge wasted opportunity that Western audiences couldn't get an adaptation of one of the best songs from the entire franchise. And while it may have made a bit more sense to swap out something like Dragon Ball Z's iconic theme Cha-La Head Cha-La from some of the other Dragon Ball games for their Western release, since it wasn't the theme song Americans got back in the day, localized versions of Makafushigi Adventure were used for the original series around the world.
But honestly, aside from that missed opportunity, the game's music is just kinda fine. Like, I don't have anything against it, but it's alright.
Either way, if I had to describe the game's music in any way, it's that it probably comes close to sounding like what the music would sound like had there been a redub of the original Dragon Ball done in the late 2000s. I say this in the sense that it works as a piece of music designed to supplement Dragon Ball's imagery, but that it also sounds pretty modern and of the era at the same time. Essentially, it's less Dragon Ball Z, and just a bit more All in all, it's functional, it works, and oh yeah, the Red Ribbon Army's theme is actually really good and pretty tonally in line with the series' own awesome Red Ribbon theme.
So does Dragon Ball Advanced Adventure hold up? Well, yes, and as I said earlier, I'm genuinely shocked that I've gone as long as I have without playing this game before.
At the time it came out, Dragon Ball Advanced Adventure had to have been one of the freshest Dragon Ball games on the market. Its decision to cover Goku's childhood adventures, the choice to make it a beat-em-up with 2D fighter elements over an out-and-out fighting game or action RPG, and the fact that a company like Dimps was put in charge of it led to it being an incredibly fun and unique experience for fans of the franchise. It also just made sense for the franchise in hindsight, as back in the early 2000s, there were often multiple Dragon Ball games coming out per year in the USA, and none of them were about the original series.
Dragon Ball Advanced Adventure is a really good game and does a great job of taking you through the early adventures in the Dragon Ball universe. While it's a bit on the short side, I genuinely had a great time with it and can totally see myself going back to it in order to 100% it and unlock all of those bonus characters I mentioned during my review. And honestly, that's probably one of the best compliments that I can pay the game, because I don't usually do that. Anyway, that brings us to the end of this video. Be sure to leave an answer to the question of the day over in the comments if you haven't already, as well as to like the video, subscribe to the channel, or share it with your friends if you enjoyed it, because, you know, that helps the channel grow. On top of that, you're more than welcome to check out my Buy Me a Coffee page if you'd like to leave a donation, and you're more than welcome to follow me on Twitter or Instagram by looking up @NichePlays on those respective platforms. And if you haven't gotten sick of my voice yet, you're more than welcome to check out my retro TV and movie podcast, Media Obscura. The show's hosted by myself along with my girlfriend Sierra and my best friend Raekwon. We release episodes every 2 to 3 weeks, and it's a generally laid-back, kinda comedic show about retro movies and television shows. So yeah, bye.